Something changes in the way we think about death as we get older. When we're young, death can feel almost theoretical. We know it happens, of course. We've probably experienced losses. But somehow our own mortality can still feel very far away. Then we reach midlife, and death seems to become harder to ignore. Sometimes it's personal, a parent, a friend, someone our own age, and sometimes it's someone we've never met. Today, many people are seeing notifications about the death of Dolly Parton. And whether you were a huge fan or simply grew up knowing who she was, the death of someone who's been part of the cultural landscape for decades can affect us in ways we don't necessarily expect. Because sometimes it isn't only about them, it's about time. The musicians we listened to when we were young are getting older, the actors we grew up watching are disappearing. The people who seem like permanent fixtures in the world suddenly aren't here anymore. And every time it happens, there's another little reminder. We're getting older too. At 20, someone dying at 80 can seem incredibly old. At 40, 50, or 60, the distance doesn't feel quite so enormous anymore. We've lived enough life by then to understand how quickly 10 years can disappear. And we've usually experienced enough loss to know that death isn't something reserved for some distant future. Social media can make that awareness even harder to escape. You see the notification, then the photographs, then the tributes, then an old interview. Someone shares a song you haven't heard in 30 years. And suddenly you're not only thinking about the person who died, you're remembering where you were when you first heard that song. Who was in your life? How old your children were? Maybe how young your parents once seemed. And how much life has happened since. That's why the death of someone we've never met can sometimes produce very real emotion. They can become markers in our own life story. And their absence reminds us that the world we remember from childhood and young adulthood is slowly changing. That realization can be sad. It can be unsettling. But it can also change the way we value the time that's still in front of us. Not in a live every day like it's your last kind of way, just in a quieter way. Maybe we appreciate ordinary moments a little more. Maybe we understand why certain memories have become so precious. Maybe we're a little more conscious of saying what we want to say while there's still time to say it. Perhaps that's one of the stranger parts of getting older. Death doesn't necessarily become less frightening, it simply becomes more real. And when another familiar person disappears from the world, sometimes we're grieving them. Sometimes we're grieving a little piece of our own past. And sometimes we're feeling both. Life's like this. See you next time.